So, a 65 Deluxe Reverb costs about $1,500. But what if that became this? Okay, Soul Stringers, welcome back. We all know that the 65 Fender Deluxe Reverb is the holy grail of guitar amps. But did you know that you could get the same iconic sounds for a fraction of the price? Universal Audio Dream 65 promises to do that. But is it too good to be true? Well, let's find out. As always, let's start with a quick rundown of the controls and the construction. What you have at the bottom, as with all the UA FX amp pedals that you have in the series, the Woodrow, the Lion, etc., you have two foot switches at the bottom. One is for the on-off, the other one is for your preset change when you save or load presets through the app. Then the controls, although they look fairly similar to the other pedals, are all dependent on what original amp they were modeled on. As per the original Deluxe Reverb, you have bass and treble. There's no mid. So that's your EQ section. Then here you have the boost, which acts in a number of different ways, and we'll get to that later on, but it's essentially acting as a boost in front of the amp. Up top, again, like the original amp, you have one volume, and that's the only volume that you have, and you have the reverb. Then here, what they've added is a master output. And this is a fairly common mod even to the original amp. So it's quite cool that they've added that. In the middle, you have where all the magic occurs. So you've got your cab switch. So it comes preloaded with 3 UA cabs, same technology as you've got in the aux box. So one could assume they're really high quality, very cool. Then you have the multi-function switch where you can go alt in programming, and that affects the treble knob and the boost, and that's for the tremolo function, which originally comes with those amps. So you put it up in the alt function and you turn it for the depth and the speed of the trem. Finally, then you have the amp selector. It comes with 3 different amps. Middle is stock. Then if you go down at the bottom, you get one of the most requested mods to the amp, which is kind of the Stevie Ray Vaughan mod. And that adds a little extra gain. It adds a little more mids to your sound. Then finally, you have the lead, which is another super common mod that people used to do on these amps originally, which essentially removes the bright caps. So in conjunction with the boost dial, if it goes above 0, it will sound warmer than your stock amplifier. And as you increase the boost knob, it will add more range, hence why it's called the lead mod. If we quickly look at the back, and hopefully you can see it with my wires connected, but very simple, stereo in, stereo out. Then you have your power connection, and finally you have the USB to do the updates, etc. from your PC or Mac. Finally, you have the pairing button here when you connect it to the UA app. If you want a more in-depth review of the app, check out my review of the UFX Lion because I went into a little more detail regarding the app and what it can do. Enough talking, let me plug in and we'll listen to a few sounds. Okay guys, as you can see, I am plugged in. I've got my guitar going straight into the Dream 65, and that goes into my audio interface and straight into Reaper. No post effects, no cabs, everything comes from this pedal. Why don't we just start off with everything in the middle except for the reverb and the boost, just to hear the normal plain sound. So I think this is maybe a common misconception about this amp. As soon as you put everything in the middle like that, yes, there isn't much headroom, is there? But that's why they've included the master out. So let's turn the volume down and put the master out slightly higher and see what happens. We're still in the first cab and we're still on the stock amp. So you see that cleaned up really, really nicely, and there is plenty of headroom there. Now, being a reverb, let's put some of that reverb up and see. That is possibly one of the best reverbs I've ever heard. It's incredible. It sounds really lush. It's the real thing. I'm so in love with that reverb. It just sounds so sweet. So let's turn that down a little bit. And finally, on this amp, just put the volume, so the main volume up, and see how that works with the boost. Let's put the boost at 12 o'clock, and you'll see. Let's now, for fun, move to the lead amp and see how that changes on the. Clean the volume up a little bit and try it by raising the boost. Let's move on to the SRV mod, let's call it that way. Put the boost a little down and see what happens. Finally, we've got to try out the vibrato, right? Let's do it. Let's go in Alt, put the speed and intensity, and there you go. So that vibrato is beautiful again. It goes from crazy, almost unusable levels to a really discreet vibrato at the end just to add a bit of lushness or anything in between. I really like it. Those were just a few of the settings on this pedal. Don't be fooled because there's a lot more tweaking to be done. You can get all the sounds from the original. You just need to play around with it. And also the way the master output and the master volume interact is really, really good. The treble and bass work very, very well together. Depending on what amp you're in, they do slightly different things and they affect slightly different curves of the EQ. So really, really good. I'm very impressed with that. Oh, hang on. And before we move on, I'm just really curious, guys. Can you find me another pedal that's sub $400 that sounds like that? That's your challenge. Let me know in the comments because I'd be really surprised if you managed to find something that sounds this good. Okay guys, you know what time it is. It's the pros and cons time, even though I shouldn't really call it pros and cons because it's not a competition. So it might suit you slightly less, whatever. Let's all be nice to each other. But let's start with the pros anyways. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, right? This pedal is unbelievably realistic in capturing both the sound and the feel of a real, authentic Fender 65 Deluxe Reverb. I'm mentioning again the feel because I think for a lot of guitar players, and certainly it is for me, the feel is something that is very hard to find in a lot of modern modeling amps and pedals, multi-effects, etc. People might not realize the difference if you're playing a gig, but how it feels to you as a player is really different to playing a old school tube amp. And I've got to say, this has that sponginess, that responsive feel. It has exactly that pick attack that more you dig in, the more it overdrives. It really has that relationship with the player that a old school amp has. We then also have to mention the obvious. It's tiny, it's small, you've got really high quality cabs in there. It's really compact, very simple to use. You bring it to a gig, to a rehearsal, you don't have to worry about changing the tubes, you don't have to worry about bringing that big old amp with you. This is incredibly convenient for a modern guitar player. Third of all, maybe people don't really nowadays understand how many times you've heard a real Fender Deluxe Reverb. So this being a carbon copy of that really in every way makes it really versatile. You can still do classic rock with it. You can still do alternative rock with it. You've heard it on a number of records and you probably don't even know it. But this is and has always been a very, very incredibly versatile amp. It takes pedals really well and it works in a lot of different genres. And the Dream 65 is absolutely the same. It makes no difference. As you saw during some of the little tunes that I did for this video, I plugged a fuzz pedal in it, I plugged various delays in it as well, and it takes pedals really, really well. So if you want to boost it, if you want to get a higher distortion, you can do that. It's an incredibly versatile and complete amp. Some may say the ultimate amp. The final point I want to mention before we move on to the cons or the things that you might need to be aware of before purchasing this is that not all of us, myself included, can afford to buy a Deluxe Reverb, a Fender Deluxe Reverb. Not all of us have the capacity in terms of the space or in terms of the noise levels required to have a proper amp. And this is the perfect solution for that, because it does exactly the same thing, but it's silent, obviously, and it's small, and it costs under 400 bucks. So I think these are very, very important things to think about, because these videos are not for people that have tons of cash to spend on things. These videos are for people like myself, like you, that for various different reasons have to be realistic with something that they can afford, that they can use, that they can record with, and it really, really doesn't get any better than this. And that last bit brings us really nicely to the cons. One of the things which I'm struggling to understand with all of these UA amp pedals is, why did they not include a headphone out? I honestly do not understand it. And I get it's an amp and it's supposed to be used for recording or live gigs, etc. But if they just put a headphone amp, it would be the ultimate practice amp. I would not use anything else. I would use this, the Lion if I wanted a Marshall tone, and that's it. But I don't know why they don't have that headphone amp. And I guess for me, it's not a big deal because I still play it all the time, hooking it up to my audio interface through my computer or through a speaker. But headphones would have been good. I just don't get it. Secondly, and it's not really a con, but I've got to put out a massive disclaimer, because otherwise people are going to start commenting, people are going to start talking about this, and there's already a lot of misinformation on this app. And I've done my research, I've looked at some of the videos, and some of the comments just don't make sense. Yes, it has limited features. Yes, it's not suited for a high gain scenario. So if you're playing metal or whatever, this isn't the amp for you. That's the big, bold disclaimer. If you are looking for more features, if you are looking for high gain, this is not for you, okay? So just understand that. It's like bananas and apples, right? What the fuck? I just don't get that point. So I'm putting this in the con section just to highlight it for you guys. But for me, it's a bit silly to be talking about that. Okay, guys, it's time for my final verdict. Look, if you told me 10 years ago that I would have been doing a review on something that sounds like a 65 Deluxe Reverb, and it's a little box like this that sounds and feels almost as good as the original, then I wouldn't have believed it. This for me is an incredible achievement by UA. This, the Lion, all the pedals in the range. To be honest, they have really moved the bar forward. And I think one of the reasons that they have moved that bar forward is because they've taken that know-how from the aux box in terms of the cabs, and they've included it in here. I'll say this over and over again. The cab section is the most important part of your sound, whether it's a digital version, whether it's a real cab, that's what defines your sound. And the UA pedals are the only ones that I don't actually disable the cab and go through something like Speaker Mix Pro or something like 2Notes, because they're just such high quality. This is not just a recreation of the Deluxe Reverb, because it's that plus 2 separate mods on it, 2 mods that have made history in terms of the sounds and the people that recorded with them. And it does it in such a smart way that is really user-friendly. Again, I keep saying this, but it's just very, very well thought out. You actually don't need to read anything. It's helpful if you do, because it's not simplistic, but it's easy to use, if that makes sense, because the boost function does do various different things. On the stock amp, it acts as a volume boost only. On the other amps, it acts as more of an overdrive, pushing the amp and adding more mid-range. So it is a multi-function. It has a lot of depth, but it keeps doing it in a very intuitive way for the user. There's no screens, nothing like that. And I've got to say, across the series of these UA amp pedals, it is the best of both worlds. One final point, I've got to say, the only research you have to do on this is really just on how to dial it in right, on what it's supposed to be like. This is not a kind of version of a 65. This is an actual 65. So a lot of people complain about missing headroom, etc., etc. Well, in my opinion, that's not really accurate, because with the mod of the master output, and that's exactly why people started doing that mod, it allows you to turn the only volume that you have down and increase your output to have more headroom. And another point, don't forget, have you ever tried running a 65 Deluxe Reverb to breakup point to all screaming leads at any human reasonable level? They are very loud amps. And this, like the Lion did, brings it all in a usable format that us mere humans can use. So in conclusion, for me, this is the ultimate amplifier, and I am so happy that I found it. And maybe it's a sound I've been looking for so long. So as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. It really does mean a lot to me. I hope you enjoyed it. If you can, please subscribe, use the links below, do everything to keep that algorithm happy. But overall, just please try the pedal out, because you won't be disappointed if that's the sound that you want, if that's the sound in your head, because everything is relative, right? It's like art. Some people may like certain styles of art, some people won't, but it doesn't mean that it's not a great product. So for me, I like it. This is a great product, but let me know in the comments what you guys think. So thanks, be nice to each other, and as usual, rock out.